We have Elaine Maddison chatting to us today about her career, about her company, and she will talk obviously about her 5 traits. So, Elaine, you're CEO of Brightsolid, which is a DC Thompson company, and I'm sure most people didn't know that they had another arm to the company. So you'll have to tell us about that. We just kind of associate it with the Beano, really, and not much else. But you're telling me that that's still going. Good. I haven't seen it for a while. I must do that. Anyway, tell us about you and Brightsolid, your company.
Thanks, Ros, and thanks for having me today. So Brightsolid is a hybrid cloud managed services provider. We're based in the northeast of Scotland, and as you said, we are part of the DC Thompson company. We're a bit different to the rest of the business, but we're very much part of the group and benefit from being part of the group. Brightsolid is a small team. We're about 65 people, and we support customers across their digital transformation projects. And we do that kind of in oil and gas, in the public sector, and in the private sector as well. And we've very recently, or over the last year, moved into cybersecurity as well. So that's been quite an interesting development on our journey. And I've been chief executive since January 2019, so coming up for 5 years in the business, and it's been a whirlwind of a 5 years, as no doubt anyone who's kind of lived through the 2020 to 2023 experience will resonate with.
So tell us a bit about your career and how you got to become CEO of Brightsolid, which is quite a male-dominated IT industry. Were you always in IT? Is this a departure? Tell us everything.
I'd love to say that it was a well thought through plan, Ros, but you know me, and it wasn't. So I started off life in IT. So I studied computing science at the University of Aberdeen, which is a sort of slightly dim and distant memory now. And I actually went to work in IT for a short period of time after that. And honestly, pretty quickly recognised that it wasn't my forte. I was not cut out to be a developer. I probably wasn't smart enough to do that, but I recognised pretty quickly that actually I really liked working with people. And I sort of moved slightly into more the business analyst and change roles, all within financial services. Actually, I've been in, prior to Brightsolid, I was in financial services for around 20 years. And I moved very quickly into those kind of change and transformation roles. And being part of a regulated industry, change was constant, whether it was, driven by customers or driven by the regulator. It was the only constant that we had. And I pretty quickly I realized that I was quite good at change, and I particularly like the people aspects of change. And I think to get change right, particularly when it's technology based, you really have to focus on the people who are using the technology. Otherwise, it's a bit of a disaster. So I worked up through that kind of change route in Alliance Trust Savings, which was my career home for around 16 years. And I pretty quickly evolved into a senior management role there and moved into the operational side of the business. So I took on my first sort of C-suite role in 2010 as Chief Operating Officer in Alliance Trust Savings. And that was a whirlwind of an experience, and the company changed so many times in the time that I was there that it felt like working for 2 or 3 different organizations during that time. So I really was able to kind of hone my skill set as part of that. When I left Alliance Trust Savings, I went to work for Aegon as part of the operational team there. Aegon at that time was in the middle of acquiring the co-funds platform. So there was a lot of merger and acquisition activity going on. So I was able to expand my experience in that space. So not only looking after the sort of business as usual operations, but also getting involved in the merger of 2 businesses. And I think at that point, the people change skill set really came, into its own, basically, because at the end of the day, when you're bringing 2 organizations together, the thing that makes that succeed or not is how the people on the ground feel.
And would that more people realize that, because
Yeah.
About 70%, I can't remember the stats, I think it might have been 76% of businesses fail at that point because they don't take into consideration the people. So yeah, good for you.
Yeah, it's a really hard thing to get right, and it's a really hard thing to put yourself in the shoes of the people who are going through that change, but it's such an important thing to do. And I think at that point, I kind of always knew that I wanted a general management type role, but I wasn't really sure how to go about getting that, and certainly that wasn't a plan for me as part of the Aegon team. But when the Brightsolid opportunity came up, I was really quite excited about it. It was a business that I'd known as a customer in my Alliance Trust days. I'd previously decided to put some services with Brightsolid back in the early days of cloud when we didn't really know what it meant. So I had some good experience of the business, and I thought it was a good size of business for me to move into. I'm not exactly sure that I was what they were looking for when they came to market, but I think they later told me that I was definitely what they needed. And
Wonderful.
yeah, no, it was a really nice thing to hear, and it's been an incredible journey so far. The first year was really all about getting to know the business and the team. And Brightsolid was a business that had grown very quickly, quite, organically over a short period of time. So really just putting in the foundations for growth in that first year and making sure that we had the right people. And then, of course, a year into my first CEO role, COVID hit. So that was a bit of an unexpected gift that I wasn't quite sure how to deal with, but it's been an absolute learning experience ever since. And I think the world that we're operating in now is completely different to the one that I walked into in 2019, and we've all learned so much along the way. Um,
Where
and
did
my
can I just what's one of the most significant things you've learned as a result of COVID and lockdown and all of that stramash?
I think for me, it's probably the need to be. There's probably two things. I think the first is the need to be agile and being able to adapt to circumstances that you just can't control. And I think for all of us, the world that we're operating in is so different to what it was pre-pandemic. And the ability to be agile and pivot and adapt to new circumstances is really key. And the second one, I think, which wasn't so much of a learning as more a validation of something I already believed in, was just really focusing in on your people. And at the end of the day, I think what COVID did was open up everyone to be far more accessible and human than they ever were before. You and I mean, I'm sitting looking into your study, you're sitting looking into mine, and I think over COVID, we gained an appreciation of each other outside of work that you just couldn't experience unless you'd spent years working with someone. And I think the need to protect that at all costs and to look after your team is really something that, I think a lot of people had to learn pretty quickly. As we shifted to remote working and all that came with that.
Anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted you. So
No, that was it really. So I mean, it's great. We've got a great team at Brightsolid. We're doing really interesting things. And yeah, we're excited about where we can take the business.
well, two things occur to me. One is you're working in, I think, as I said at the beginning, quite a male-dominated industry. And number two is DC Thomson's a family business, and that has its own kind of interesting nuances. Can you tell us a little bit about these two things and how you've managed to cope with that?
So I think on the first point, and it's funny because you did ask me that at the beginning, and I didn't answer it, but it's because I think it's an environment that I've grown up in since university. I was the only female in my university class. And actually, it didn't really strike me as being anything to worry about, and in my early career, um, I was just one of the team. I didn't really see the difference. I didn't feel the gender bias. It probably wasn't until I got to a more senior position in my career that I did feel a little bit of that gender bias. And I think I'll mention it sort of when we get onto the kind of 5 leadership traits, but it's one of the things about you just have to be yourself, and you have to be unapologetically yourself. You can't be anyone else. And I think there are lots of things that different people bring to the table, and I think getting comfortable with what you bring to the table, regardless of gender or any other differences, I think that's just really important. But it can be tough at times as well. And I think the other question about being part of a family business, this is my first time working as part of a group that's a family run business. And overall, I would say it's hugely positive. I think the directors at DC Thomson um, they really care about the communities that they serve, whether that's their readership, whether it's their digital subscribers, whether it's the local communities, they affectionately call it courier country, or whether it's their people. They actually really care, and they operate the business, as I understand it, they operate the business to leave it in a better condition for the next generation of Thompsons than was handed over to them. And I think it's a really lovely and progressive way of working. And they're, as shareholders, they are challenging, of course, and they want us to do well, but they're incredibly supportive. And as a team, we really feel the benefit of that.
That's wonderful. Absolutely marvelous. Courier country?
Courier country, so anywhere where the Courier is sold, which is the flagship newspaper, or
surely not just Dundee. That must be
no, Dundee, Aberdeen, Fife. Yeah, it's
abroad maybe. No, do they?
I don't think so.
Right. So it's very a Scottish
It is,
newspaper.
yeah.
Right. Well,
It is.
it would have had tentacles to other parts, Airts and Perts. So what have been the kind of high points if you take your whole career? What have been some of the high points for you?
Oh, that is a massive question. I think there's probably a couple. So when I was at Alliance Trust Savings, I led the acquisition of another business. I'd never done it before. I was sort of thrown in at the deep end to try and acquire a business, and it was really important for our growth plans at that time. And it was a business that was in 2 parts. One was a very straightforward, part of it was very straightforward and very similar to what we already did. And another part was a bit more complex and a bit trickier, shall we say. And I was supported very ably by a really good team. But I was really at the forefront of those conversations with the selling party. And having never done that before, I didn't really know what to expect. And people can give you advice and templates, and they can give you the playbook of how all of that conversation is supposed to go. But until you're actually in it, it really comes down to the strength of the relationships you build and the vision that you present for, the organization at the end of an acquisition. And I remember we'd been sort of summoned down to London for a last conversation, and it was us and another party. And I remember being in London City Airport with a colleague who'd kind of been by my side all the way through and had far more experience than I did, and was sort of guiding me through it. And we got the call to say that we had been successful and that we were the preferred bidder. And I just remember feeling so incredibly proud of myself, because it was strategically really important for the organization at that time. And it was one time where I thought, God, I did that. I'm really proud of it. So I learned a huge amount along the way. And the second thing is probably in Brightsolid, actually. And we've really pivoted the business from being a traditional data center, and everyone, Brightsolid has a really strong brand in Scotland, but it's known for being a data center business where people can come and put their servers in our racks in either Dundee or Aberdeen. But actually, there's so much more to us. And I think what we've done most recently is really break out of that sort of historic version of the business and really taken to market what, who we are and what we can do. And that's massive thanks to the team that are working with me, but it's something that we're really proud of.
Fantastic. So if you could, what might you have done differently?
Oh, oh my goodness, that's really tricky. But I think in everything, I would have doubted myself less. I think as a female in leadership, it's very difficult sometimes to really hold fire with your self belief and not second guess yourself. And you know that because you and I have talked about that quite a lot. But I think actually, when I look back, I don't have any regrets. And actually, that's because I was really considered in most of the things that I did. And if I just had maybe, a little less doubt along the way, I maybe could have got there a bit quicker.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I think that's great advice for young women who are entering a management
Yes.
role. Because I think there is no doubt there's a sex difference. I've worked with women, as you know, around the world, and it is around the world. That women doubt themselves, they beat themselves up, they go for perfection rather than adequacy.
It's so frustrating because we know we're doing it, right? We know when we're doing it, and you need to catch yourself and have a conversation with yourself. And that's not something that comes naturally to women in general, but it's if you can build in the practice of doing it, as you've taught me, it's about actually how you can kind of course correct and just get yourself back on track without, dilly-dallying for too long.
And you don't have to be arrogant about it, because it sounds as if I was suggesting that, and not at all. You just need to say, I'm good at this and I'm okay and I can proceed. And yeah,
Yeah,
wonderful, wonderful.
absolutely.
So give us your 5 traits or things that have taken you to the top.
So, the first one, and I think the most important one for anyone going into a management or leadership position, is just to be yourself. I think authenticity is so important in leadership. Throughout my career, I've been told that I'm not aggressive enough, I'm not salesy enough, I'm not tough enough, and earlier in my career, that has had a significant impact on me. When people are telling you that you're not enough of something, there's a tendency to say, well, I'll show you, and I'll be tough and I'll be this and I'll be that. But actually, looking back over my career in the moments that I'm most proud of, it's where I've really leaned into my ability to connect with people. And I've always tried to do that in a kind way. And I think that as I've got older, I'm much more comfortable about what I bring to the table. And I know that that is enough. You know, don't get me wrong, as you well know, I've got blind spots and, excuse me, capability
We've
gaps
all got
like
loads of that.
everyone does. But I don't feel like I need to pretend that I'm the smartest person in the room. Which probably brings me to my second point, which is around, make sure that you've got a really good team around you. I think if you're humble enough to know that you don't need to be the smartest person in the room, building the right team is really key. And I say building the team because it's not just about hiring into a role. It's about working out what the business needs or what your organization needs, both in terms of capability and cultural fit, and recognizing that actually that need may be different today than it might be in 3 years. And it's about having, an eye on both today and the future. And then once you've got those people on board, actually working really hard to foster, a team culture that allows everyone to bring out their best selves and to deliver for the business. It's taken me 4.5 years, and a lot of patience and effort to get the right team for Brightsolid. And I think the team that we've got now is phenomenal. There's not a lot of ego in the team, which I think is incredibly important. I think we all bring something different to the table in terms of capabilities and experience, and that allows us to bring different perspectives and challenge to the conversation, so that we're not all, just nodding our heads in agreement with someone. We've got people who actively play devil's advocate and try and see it from the other perspective, and it's a really safe environment to do that in. So that's number two. Number three, which I think is really important, is focusing on outcomes. I think it's really easy to get lost in the day-to-day of everything that you're trying to deal with. If you've had a busy and stressful day and, you sort of forget about the bigger picture, or maybe you've had a win, and actually you're so busy celebrating success that you take your eye off the ball for a second. And I think having a really clear set of business outcomes, for you or your team that you can hold yourself accountable to, really helps just keep you on track. And it also gives you a really good mechanism for communication as well. So whether that's with, customers or the market or your shareholders or internally in your team, being able to say, look, we set out to achieve this and we are achieving it, or we're slightly off track and here's what we're going to do about it, I think is a really good way of just keeping everyone focused on what you're trying to achieve.
Fantastic.
The fourth one, sorry, Ros.
No, I was just saying fantastic.
Oh.
Keep going.
The fourth one is integrity, which I think is hugely important. There's that wonderful saying is, integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is looking. And it's a value that I hold really close to my heart. I think, there's been times I find it really easy to speak up for others when I see that something's not quite right. But there have been times in my career where I've felt really tested by this, where I've seen something that's not right. And I know that speaking up will have quite severe consequences for an individual or the organization. But I think I've always managed to, after much soul searching, to find a way to do it in the most respectful and open way possible. And I think it is really, really important. I think, as leaders, we can create pressure in our organizations that we don't necessarily see on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's really important to have a culture of openness where people do feel that they can, raise their hand and say, look, something isn't right here. And I try and encourage my team to do that as much as they feel able to. And then the last one is building resilience. Which you've probably heard from lots of people that you've already spoken to, Ros, but I think I've learned quite a lot about resilience over the last 3 years. For me, for a long time, resilience wasn't something that you could build. It was a measure of how much, how long you could keep going under duress, or, how quickly you could get up after a fall. And actually, over the last 3 years, particularly since the pandemic and just a change of mindset, I think building resilience is something that we should all focus on every day, every week, every month. It's about, proactively, building your support system, whether that's professional or personal, getting outside, getting fresh air, looking after yourself, making sure that you set realistic goals and maintain a healthy perspective. Because I think when your perspective, gets a little bit screwed up, it can just have such a big impact on how you feel about yourself and about how much progress you're making. And I just don't think resilience is something that any of us have in buckets inside of us. It's something that we need to work on all the time.
Thank you. That's marvelous.
I think that's me.
Wonderful. I just recap. I think being yourself is really important. And I love the idea of being kind and fair. Would that there were more female world leaders rather than small men and big egos, gosh, world would be a different place. I think a team, a humility to know that you can't do everything yourself is a fabulous leadership skill. And the thing that impinged on me was 4.5 years to build a team. I mean, it's a patient thing because you kiss a few frogs on the way, don't you? And you need to learn from that and help them to find something else that suits them better and bring other fresh blood in. And you've managed that, which is fabulous.
And I think, sorry, Ros, I think you're right about kissing frogs, but I also think there's people who are right for an organization at a point in time who serve the business and themselves really well as part of that. But as organizations evolve and grow, the needs change, don't they? So it's really important to just keep those conversations honest both ways, so that the right people find the right paths for them, and you also find people who can take your business to the next level.
Yes, and it doesn't have to be contentious. You could help them
Agreed.
find something more suitable to them. People hang on to jobs by their fingernails, and often it's the wrong thing for them. I mean, they're depressed by it. And get more stimulation. Focusing on outcomes, absolutely. Focusing on performance, because it's a business, not a charity. Even charities should focus on outcomes.
Agreed.
Integrity, absolutely. And I'll come back on that. And resilience. I mean, yes, get out. It's better for work and business if we are resilient and relaxed. I'm a great believer in relaxation as the antidote to all stress. But the thing I'm going to take with me from all of your chat, and it's a lovely quote that you just gave, doing the right thing, even if no one is looking. I'm really going to remember that. I love that. I'm going to put that somewhere. I'm going to put it in neon lights.
I wish I could tell you who said it first, but I see it quite often on LinkedIn, and it always reminds me that it is about, just, whether it's for your customers or your team or for yourself, being able to kind of sleep at night and being able to be comfortable with all the decisions you've made. They might not be easy decisions, but if you know that you've done the right thing for the business, at the end of the day, I think you can be happy with that and rest assured on that.
Absolutely. And sleep is very important for everyone.
Yes, I love my sleep.
Bring us
I
back
sleep very
full
well.
circle. Elaine, thank you so much. That's been a joy. And keep doing what you're doing. It sounds pretty damn good. Okay.
Thanks, Ros.
Bye.
Bye.